What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving into one of the most explosive topics in Cowboys Nation, trade rumors. Not just any rumors either. We're talking about 10 trades the Dallas Cowboys could realistically make during the 2026 NFL Draft that could totally reshape this team's future. We're going to talk bold moves, smart value plays, cap implications, who gets extended, who gets shipped out, and how the Cowboys can go from almost there to legitimate Super Bowl contenders. So grab a snack, settle in, and stick around to the end, because some of these trade ideas are going to sound insane at first, but when you hear the logic, they might just make too much sense. All right, before we jump in, quick reminder, nothing here is guaranteed to happen. These are hypothetical but realistic trade scenarios based on trends from previous drafts, contract timelines, and how the Cowboys front office has operated in the past under Jerry and Stephen Jones. We're going to think like a GM, but also like a fan who's tired of the "we like our guys" routine. Let's imagine what could happen if the Cowboys finally decide to be aggressive, or at least strategic, during the 2026 NFL Draft. Let's start with the big picture philosophy. By 2026, the Cowboys are deep into their current core's timeline. You've got key contracts either coming up or in their expensive phases, you've got young pieces who need extensions, and you've got an NFC that's likely shifted a bit with new contenders rising and old ones fading. Draft weekend is where smart teams manipulate the board, move up, move down, and turn players into picks, or picks into stars. Dallas has often sat tight and trusted their board, which has worked in some ways. But the flip side is that they've often almost contended without getting over the hump. So in this video, we're assuming the Cowboys are willing to be just a bit bolder than usual. Let's kick off with trade idea number 1, a move up in round 1 to grab a true difference maker at a premium position. Picture this. The Cowboys enter the 2026 draft, picking somewhere in the late teens or early 20s. Maybe they've had a solid but not spectacular season, a wild card exit, something like that. There's a blue chip player sliding, maybe an elite left tackle prospect, a shutdown corner, or a dynamic edge rusher who was projected top 5 but is still on the board around pick 10 or 11. Under normal circumstances, Dallas might say, "We'll let the board come to us." But this time, they pick up the phone. The trade. Dallas sends its 2026 first-round pick, plus a second-round pick, and maybe a mid-round sweetener to jump into the top 10 or 12. The logic here is simple. If you believe this player is a decade-long foundation piece, like a Tyron Smith-level tackle, a Micah Parsons-level defender, or a true CB1, then sacrificing some draft capital is worth solidifying a spot that you don't want to be patching every offseason. This kind of move signals that the Cowboys are trying to maximize the core they already have, not sit and hope. It also lines up with their history. They did something similar in the past to secure guys they really believed in. In this scenario, the team you're trading with is likely one that's rebuilding and wants more picks, while Dallas is in a win-now window and is willing to consolidate. The payoff? You walk out of night 1 with a player who can start immediately, play 90% of snaps, and meaningfully change games. That's the type of swing that could define the entire draft weekend. Trade idea number 2. A trade down from the first round to stack picks and attack multiple needs. Now, this might sound like the total opposite of the first idea, but that's the reality of draft weekend. It's all about flexibility. Let's say the Cowboys are on the clock at pick, say 21. Their top-tier cluster of players is off the board. The guy they were eyeing went 2 picks earlier. Instead of forcing a pick on someone with a late first or even early second-round grade, they look at the phone lines lighting up. A quarterback-needy team, or a team desperate for a specific wide receiver or corner, calls Dallas. The trade. Dallas moves from 21 down to maybe 30 or 32. and in return picks up an additional second rounder or a third and a future second. This type of trade could allow the Cowboys to leave the draft with multiple starters instead of just one. You could grab a borderline first-round offensive lineman late in the first, then use the added second-round pick on a defensive tackle, a safety, or a wide receiver who fits perfectly into your scheme at a much better value. This approach matches the idea of building depth and sustaining competitiveness, especially if you're paying big money to some superstars on offense and defense. The more cheap rookie contract contributors you have, the easier it is to keep your stars and still fill out a complete roster. And if there's no absolute must-have guy at your original spot, trading down is often the smartest move you can make. Trade idea number 3. Flipping a veteran offensive lineman for draft capital. By 2026, the Cowboys' offensive line could look very different from the early 2020s. You might have some aging veterans on big contracts, and some promising younger guys ready to step in. Think about a solid, above-average veteran guard or tackle who's 30 or 31, still playing well, but coming up on a contract decision. Instead of letting him walk for a compensatory pick a year later, or overpaying to keep him when you've already drafted his replacement, the Cowboys could strike during the draft. The trade. Dallas sends this veteran lineman to a contender that just lost a starter to injury or retirement. In return, the Cowboys receive a third-round pick, maybe plus a late-round swap. Why would a contender do this? Because late in the offseason or during draft weekend, plugging a known, reliable, Pro Bowl-caliber lineman into their lineup is worth more to them than a mid-round rookie who might need 2 years to develop. For Dallas, this move does two things. It saves cap space and accelerates the transition to younger, cheaper talent. It also gives them another dart to throw in the middle rounds, where they have historically found good value. In that range, they could grab a developmental tackle, a rotational edge, or that physical corner they've been missing. Yes, it hurts to move on from a fan-favorite veteran. But if your scouting department believes in your young guys, this is the kind of move that keeps the roster fresh and prevents you from being stuck with an expensive line that all ages out at the same time. Trade idea number 4. A big-name splash. Trading for an established star wide receiver during the draft. Picture this scenario. A star receiver on another team is unhappy, maybe due to contract issues, quarterback uncertainty, or a new coaching staff that doesn't prioritize him. Think of the type of move we've seen around the league before, where elite receivers get moved on draft night for a package of picks. The Cowboys, looking to either support their current quarterback or set up a young QB for success, decide to make a move. The trade. Dallas sends its 2026 first-round pick, and possibly a mid-rounder or a future second, to land this top 15 receiver in his prime. In return, they get a guy who can step in on day one as a legit WR1 or high-end WR2, forcing defenses to play honest and opening up everything for the passing game. The risk? You're giving up a first-round pick and then likely having to pay a big contract, since star receivers don't come cheap. The reward? No guesswork. You're not hoping a rookie pans out. You're acquiring someone with a proven track record of beating man coverage, winning at all 3 levels of the field, and showing up in big moments. If the Cowboys believe they're a piece or two away on offense, this kind of go-get-him move during the draft could transform them from a good offense into a truly elite one again. It also sends a message to the locker room. We're all in on this window, and we're going to surround our quarterback with real weapons. Trade idea number 5. Trading a disgruntled or soon-to-be expensive defensive player for a high pick. One thing we know about the modern NFL, you can't pay everybody, especially on defense. If you've drafted well and developed several stars, eventually some of them are going to get expensive. Let's imagine a scenario where a top defensive player, maybe an edge rusher opposite your main star, or a cornerback who broke out, or a safety who outplayed his contract, is nearing extension time. Maybe negotiations are stalling. Maybe he wants top-of-the-market money, and the Cowboys front office is hesitant. Draft weekend is the perfect leverage point. The trade. Dallas moves this player to a defensive-needy team that's willing to pay him what he wants, in exchange for a late first or early second-round pick, plus perhaps a later pick. This is painful, no question. You're getting rid of a known asset, a player fans love. But sometimes, turning one expensive player into multiple cheap, controllable players is what keeps a roster competitive over the long term. For Dallas, this move makes the most sense if they already have depth at that position or believe they can find a younger replacement in the draft. For example, trading a second corner and then using the early pick you got back on an elite corner prospect would reset the financial clock at that spot for 4 to 5 years. Or moving a pass rusher and drafting his replacement in the first, then using extra picks to reinforce the interior defensive line, where they've often been light. This is the kind of tough, chess-like decision you see from the best-run franchises, and it's exactly the type of move that could happen quickly, live, while we're all watching the 2026 draft broadcast. Trade idea number 6. A move back into round 1 from round 2 to grab a falling quarterback or premium prospect. Now this one depends heavily on where the Cowboys are at with the quarterback situation in 2026. If they're still committed to the same starter, this could instead be for a top corner, tackle, or edge that unexpectedly falls. But let's imagine a scenario where there's uncertainty at QB. Either they're looking towards the future, or they want a legit backup who could become the guy. A quarterback with first-round talent starts slipping into the late 20s. Several teams ahead of Dallas already have their franchise guy locked up, so the Cowboys see an opening. The trade. Dallas packages its early second-round pick plus a future second, maybe with a late-round pick swap, to trade up into the late first and grab that quarterback. Why late first and not just wait for him at their second-round pick? Fifth-year option. Having that fifth-year team option on a first-round quarterback is massive when it comes to roster building. It gives you extra time before a mega extension and more flexibility to decide if he's really your guy. Even if your current QB is entrenched, having a talented youngster on a rookie deal behind him either gives you insurance or a trade asset down the line. If this trade isn't for a QB, imagine it for a premium edge rusher or lockdown corner. Same logic applies. You're paying an extra pick to secure a difference maker and that valuable fifth-year option, instead of gambling that he'll fall all the way to your second-round slot. Trade idea number 7. Trading a future first-round pick to acquire multiple day 2 picks in 2026. This is a more creative, Patriots-Belichick-style move. Let's say the Cowboys view the 2026 draft class as deep in the second and third rounds, particularly at positions they need: defensive line, offensive line, linebacker, safety, maybe receiver depth. Instead of sitting with a future 2027 first-round pick that they expect will be in the 20s anyway, they decide to cash it in now. The trade. Dallas sends its 2027 first-round pick to a rebuilding team that wants future premium capital, and in return, they receive that team's 2026 second and third, maybe even an additional fourth. Why would another team do this? Because they might be struggling, projecting their 2027 first to be a top 10 or top 15 pick, making the trade worth it for them. For Dallas, who expects to be competitive, that 2027 first might be in the late 20s, and they'd rather have 2 or 3 picks right now in the sweet spot of the draft to load up their roster. This kind of move is about maximizing the present window while still staying young and cap flexible. You draft 3 players who can contribute immediately or by year 2, and you give your coaching staff more young talent to develop. It's the opposite of mortgaging the future for one star. You're actually spreading the risk across multiple picks, which can be a smart play if your scouting department is confident in the depth of the class. Trade idea number 8. Acquiring a veteran defensive tackle or run stuffer for a mid-round pick. If there's been one recurring complaint from Cowboys fans over the years, it's been the run defense and the interior of the defensive line. So imagine this. On day 2 or day 3 of the 2026 draft, the Cowboys see that the board isn't falling the way they want at defensive tackle. The guys they like are gone, or the next group is a reach for their current pick. Instead of forcing it, they look around the league at teams with surplus on the interior D-line, or teams transitioning schemes where some big bodies no longer fit perfectly. The trade. Dallas sends a 4th-round pick, maybe with a late conditional pick, to land a proven veteran defensive tackle who's still solid against the run, can play 40–50% of snaps, and bring some leadership to the room. This isn't a splashy move like trading for a star receiver, but this is the kind of under-the-radar trade that can win you games in December and January. Stopping the run on 3rd and short, holding up at the point of attack in the playoffs, those moments are decided in the trenches. A trade like this also balances your roster. Instead of having a bunch of young, unproven guys inside, you'd have a reliable veteran to pair with your younger defensive tackles. For a mid-round pick that has maybe a 50-50 chance of even becoming a starter, getting a known quantity up front is often worth it, especially if you've already hit on some earlier picks. Trade idea number 9. Shipping out a depth receiver or tight end in a crowded room for additional picks. By 2026, the Cowboys could easily find themselves with a good problem at certain spots. Too many solid players and not enough snaps to go around. Maybe they've drafted well at wide receiver, or they have multiple tight ends they like, including a couple on rookie deals. Meanwhile, another team is thin at that very position due to injuries, misses in the draft, or free agency losses. Draft weekend is when need and opportunity collide. The trade, Dallas deals a WR3, WR4, or TE2, TE3, somebody who has flashed on film, who has special teams value, and who's still on a reasonable contract, for a 4th or 5th round pick. This is the classic sell high on depth move. The other team gets an immediate contributor who already knows how to play at NFL speed. The Cowboys get an extra pick to either draft a developmental player at a thinner spot on their roster or to bundle with another pick to move up a few spots later on. It's also a quiet way of rewarding the player, sending him to a place where he has a clearer path to targets and snaps. For Dallas, this is efficient roster management. You turn surplus at one position into more swings at other positions and keep a constant pipeline of young talent coming in. Fans might not get overly excited about trading a depth receiver for a mid-round pick, but this is the type of move smart front offices make every single year to keep the roster churning. Every one of these moves comes with risk. You can whiff on a player you traded up for. You can misjudge a veteran's market. You can trade away a guy who becomes a star somewhere else. That's the reality of the NFL. But the cost of doing nothing, year after year, and hoping the same formula suddenly leads to a different result, that has a cost, too. Cowboys fans have seen plenty of almost seasons. The 2026 NFL Draft could be one of those hinge points where the front office chooses between staying in their comfort zone or taking calculated risks to finally push this team where everyone wants it to go. So, I want to hear from you. Which of these 10 trade ideas do you think makes the most sense for the Cowboys in 2026? Would you be willing to trade a veteran